Hey guys, Yoda here, and in this video I'm going to be answering one of the most frequently asked questions I get on stream, which is, what's better, Outlaw or Sub Rogue? So the short answer is, Sub Rogue is better more of the time in my opinion, but they're both good in different situations, and actually they're both good in all situations, but Outlaw is better in some situations. We'll go with that. Okay, so just to capture all of that, I made a little sheet. Link to this sheet will be below. Basically, at the top, I have a list of like the target counts, like the different categories. And then I made a list for each dungeon on Fort and Tyran. And then also there's a little section here for the raid, but like I haven't even cleared the raid yet, so don't take this as like the be all end all or whatever. Even this part, like it's only been 3 weeks, so I could be wrong about a lot of this stuff too. Anyway, so the first category we have is single target. Sub can be better than Outlaw single target, but you have to take like different talents and stats. Like Mastery is really good for sub and AoE, and then like for your talents, you can't take Shuriken Tornado, you have to go Improved Ambush instead of Acrobatic. So for the build you're going to be playing most of the time, or like the super pad build, your single target is actually going to be pretty low compared to Outlaw. So I give sub a 6 there, Outlaw an 8. A lot of time on Tyran, though, you're going to be swapping your build. Like, you're going to be playing Improved Ambush. You're not going to be playing Shuriken Tornado, and you could even go for a little bit lower Mastery. So on Tyran, you're going to be as strong as Outlaw, basically, single target. 2 target, sub doesn't really get much. Basically, your Rupture hits an additional person, and your Secret Technique can cleave too. But you're still doing your single target rotation and just praying. Whereas Outlaw is like full blasting on cleave. This is definitely where Outlaw has the advantage. 2 targets. 3 target, Outlaw is still a little bit better. Like the rotation is still really good. 3 target, sub, you're at least using Shuriken Storm now, but it doesn't always fill your combo point bar. So sometimes you have to Shuriken twice. So your damage goes up a little bit, but not that much on 3 targets. Outlaw is still the king. 4 and 5 target, this is where sub is basically starting to come online. You're doing Shuriken and then a finisher almost every time. And basically, they're about equal, 4 target, 5 target. I think sub is a little bit better depending on your mastery. But like if you have not enough mastery, then it's about equal anyway. I put them about equal. Then once you get to higher target counts on their hand, sub starts completely taking over. So 6 to 8 targets, I think sub is like probably one of the best specs in the game. Your Rupture spread is going to be taking over here, and also on 6 to 8 targets, it's pretty rare that the pack is actually going to be grouped up enough for Outlaw to hit everything, whereas you are going to be vibing the whole time. 9 targets, again, Outlaw is just completely falling behind like huge AoE packs because, you know, Blade Flurry only hits 8 targets for some reason, whereas sub is just hitting everything the whole time. Spread AoE, we covered a little bit, so let me go into detail about that in game. Close this window real quick. Okay. So in spread AoE, you'll note that I can hit this. You'll notice that I can hit this target dummy over here with Shuriken Storm, right? Shuriken Storm, Black Powder are both hitting this target dummy. Then real quick, you'll notice I don't even have Acrobatic Strikes talented. So sub on AoE pack, sub has way longer range than Outlaw. This is without Acrobatic Strikes, by the way. Most of the time you're going to play Acrobatic Strikes, so I could hit it like all the way from over here. Or if I was here, I would hit the whole pack. Outlaw, I'm already playing Acrobatic Strikes, and I can't hit this mob. Like, I'm trying to Sinister it, I can't hit it. I can hit it with, like, this stuff between the eyes, Pistol Shot. But my Blade Flurry then wouldn't hit any of these mobs that are important. So, while Outlaw has one of the longest arms in the game compared to most melee, it is still outclassed by sub when it comes to long arms. Obviously, this has no direct damage impact, like, on the numbers, but in a realistic scenario, you're going to be moving around in each pack. It's going to be a little bit spread out, and sub is way better in those situations. Even though Outlaw is still one of the best, sub is even like way better than that. Okay, back to the sheet. The next category we have is damage profile. So damage profile, what I mean by this is like which mobs are you really hitting the hardest? I give Outlaw a slight edge here because most of the time in these packs, there's going to be one guy that you really want to kill. Like in Ruby, there's like that one big fire elemental between first and second boss. There's usually like one big dude in every single pack. Outlaw is really good at hitting that target. The one problem is they lose a lot of damage for target swapping. So Outlaw has a buff or a debuff every time you target something called Between the Eyes, and that makes your crit higher if you're targeting that mob. So basically, once they pick a target, they're on that target until they're next Between the Eyes, or for most Outlaw rogues, they're just on that target permanently. That means their target swapping is pretty bad. So if you like need to even out the pack, like let's say instead of one big guy, it's just like 4 targets with the same health. Outlaw is going to hit one target really hard, which is not ideal for time. And also if you need a target swap for like Sanguine or Bolstering or Bursting or whatever, you can do that as Outlaw, but you're going to lose damage. Sub, on the other hand, you can target swap a lot easier, but your main damage profile is just going to be full AoE blast. Like if you're using Eviscerate, just baseline, your damage is going to be quite low. So that's the damage profile. I still favor Outlaw a little bit, but it's not as bad as people make it out to be. All right, next is group utility damage loss. So this is actually a pretty major strike against Outlaw in my book. Let's go back to the game. So you notice as sub rogue, look at the utility talents up here. I can have tricks and poison. No gouge though. Tricks and poison basically without losing anything. I don't need to play subterfuge as sub. I can go with both of these. Also, like small note, Night Stalker is bugged right now, so if I wanted to, I could drop improved ambush and Night Stalker and go like a bunch of utility over here, but I'm just keeping the points here because eventually they're gonna fix this and this won't be relevant. Okay, Outlaw on the other hand, we have one major disadvantage here. So the Outlaw build is currently in Mythic Plus, the best one is around ambush. So that means you need to vanish off cooldown to use ambush, and to enhance that, you take subterfuge. If you don't take this, it's like 2 to 3% damage loss, which means you have to take these 2 talents, which doesn't automatically give you tricks. So basically, you have to pick between either this damage talent, tricks, poison, you get 2 out of 3, or you can drop poison and evasion altogether and go tricks gouge. But basically, like, you have to make a choice here as Outlaw, whereas sub basically just has everything. The main choice that's hard is like tricks versus poison. Poison is very necessary, I think, for high keys, and tricks is necessary to keep like the aggro smooth on pull usually, or when packs are chained in. Tricks is really good. So yeah, you basically lose something here as Outlaw, whereas sub doesn't lose anything. That is a major strike in my book against Outlaw. All right, back to the sheet. Next we have playstyle. So a lot of people that are like asking me this question are gonna be relatively new to each spec. So like they're trying to pick a main, right? So this will give you some information on that. Outlaw has higher APM because you have something called Adrenaline Rush. Basically, it makes your GCD shorter. Let me show you in game. So Adrenaline Rush basically reduces your GCD by 20%. Rogue baseline GCD is 1 second. Let me just go up and hit this. I have a little GCD tracker over here. It's 1 second, but if you AR, it's 0.8. So your APM is going to be a lot higher. Okay. And then the other thing that changes a bit, go back to the sheet. So Outlaw is like all on procs. Like whenever you use something, it changes your next skill. Like you can either make your ambush free or your pistol shot. Now it's free. It hits 3 times, that kind of thing. So Outlaw is a lot more proc reliant, but you basically do the same rotation no matter what you're fighting. You're doing the same thing. Like your rotation does not change based on number of targets. The only thing that changes is your procs, your rolls, like that kind of thing. It all changes every time you fight something. Like you're going to do something different based on your rolls and your procs, but it doesn't change based on number of targets. So if you don't want to like plan anything, you just want to go in and react to what buffs you get. That's Outlaw. Sub, on the other hand, is a lot more about planning and pooling. Your rotation is not going to change. Like, if you fight 2 targets, your rotation is the same on those 2 targets every time. Fight 3, same on those 3 targets every time. 4, 5, same thing. It is also a bit slower because you don't have Adrenaline Rush. So you have like 1 second GCD all the time. And I think it's a little bit more comfy to play because of the range thing I mentioned earlier. On single target, you're not even maximizing your GCD the whole time. Sometimes you have to pull, like you don't have full energy and you're just waiting for your energy to charge up. So it can be a bit boring that way. But it's definitely lower APM, and I think it's easier if you do a little bit of studying to play sub to the maximum DPS compared to Outlaw. All right, so that's the general overview of the specs. Now we're going to get into the dungeons. I'm going to do this in the game, but here's a quick sheet you can look at, just to like a little cheat sheet, just to see what I actually think about it. Obviously, this is all anecdotal, just from my experiences, and it's only been 3 weeks, so it could be wrong. Obviously, like there's between 9 and 8, obviously, is completely personal opinion. But yeah, this is what I think for all of those specs. All right, I'm going to go over it in game. The game real quick. Okay, so we'll use MDT here. So first up, we have Algathar Academy. In this dungeon, I think sub is better than Outlaw on both Fort and Tyran, and it's more pronounced on Tyran. Basically, every pull almost is going to be like in that 8 target or 6 target range, where sub is way better than Outlaw. But the main thing here is on this tree boss. This tree boss summons a bunch of adds with Germinate, and for your tank to live, it's really important that these adds all die. And Outlaw is like gonna do a lot less damage to those adds than a sub. So that's why I favor sub on this boss especially, and in this dungeon in general. Also on this boss, remember when I was talking about how Outlaw loses either poison or tricks? Well, you need both poison and tricks for this boss, because the poison reduces the damage he does to your group with Splinter Bark and Burst Forth, and you also need tricks to help with aggro when he spawns a bunch of adds. So on this boss, I think sub is like way better than Outlaw. If you can only play one. If you can play 2, I think 1 sub, 1 Outlaw is okay, because the Outlaw is going to do better boss damage. But if you can only play 1, I think like sub is basically just mandatory on this boss, especially on Tyran. So sub is, I think, better in this dungeon on both Fort and Tyran. Next we'll go to Ruby Life Pools. So this is a dungeon where I think Outlaw's better on Tyran, and on Fort, I think it's about even. So in this section, sub is going to be better because the pulls tend to be bigger. It's like 8 targets plus. On this boss, it's about equal. Once you get up here, though, Outlaw starts to take over, because in all of these pulls, like notice there's like 1 dragon or 3 mobs or 3 mobs or 3 mobs. Outlaw is like way better at that. And then on this boss in particular, it's almost 2 target cleave basically the entire time, which is Outlaw's main strength, right? And then this boss too is 2 target cleave. So Outlaw is way better on these 2 bosses, which is why I put it as the best in Tyran. But on Fort, like sub is only actually weaker here. It's better at the beginning, and it's better in this section, because you tend to do like bigger pulls in this section too. So on Fort, I think they're about equal. Tyran's Outlaw is like way better for Ruby. Next we'll do Nokud. Nokud is actually one of those dungeons where it switches IMO, in my opinion, for Fort and Tyran. On Fort, I heavily prefer sub, because a lot of these pulls tend to get spread out, especially in this section and this section. So sub's long range actually comes into full effect there. I think you're going to do way more damage in this area on Trash and in this area on Trash as sub, whereas Outlaw is going to fall behind. But on bosses, Outlaw tends to be way better. So Granith is a 2-target boss because he summons a bunch of adds. Like it's going to be 2-target cleave a lot of the fight, or 1 target sometimes. This boss is basically the same for sub and Outlaw, depending on your talents. And then this boss, Tyran Maruk, is actually very difficult. And I favor Outlaw heavily here, because Outlaw is better 2-target, and this is a 2-target boss. And then Balakar Khan is kind of even for both. Like the only advantage I'd say is for Subrogue, because you can use your Vanish when you want it to dodge his Static Spirit, whereas Outlaw needs to Vanish for damage. Or you just lose damage by not vanishing. And also in the intermission, sub is a lot stronger because it's 4-target burst AoE. Like 4-target, remember they're about equal, but for burst AoE, like if they need to die quick, then sub's better. So I think sub's better on this, but the hard bosses really are the third boss, and the first boss is kind of like a damage check. But the hardest boss really is this third boss, which is Outlaw is really better, way better against this boss. So I think Outlaw's better on Tyran, and Sub's better on Fort for this dungeon. Okay, Azure Vault. The bosses are all about the same. Like most of them are just purely single target. Like the tree has some ads, but like you're just padding if you kill those, really. I think for all the bosses, they're about equal. Outlaw is actually better on the last boss, I think, because you vanish just naturally all the time, which drops the slow stacks, and you're better. I think they're about equal at killing the crystals, but the vanish thing and also having hook makes Outlaw a bit better on this boss, I think. For Fort though, a lot of these packs tend to get spread out. Not at the beginning. Like these pulls are usually pretty packed tightly together. This usually gets stacked up at least when it's 3 trees, which is the only relevant part. But then once you get here, like a bunch of these mobs do stuff that make your tank move. Like this mob is going to drop a bunch of circles on the ground. Your tank's going to be trying to dodge those. This has like this mob, which does crystalline rupture, which makes everyone run out. And then these guys have a frontal, which you're not always stopping. So that's going to make your tank run around a lot, which is where spread cleave starts to shine. This area, if you only fight this, there's only one frontal guy, so it's probably going to be pretty tightly packed. This area is usually pretty tightly packed. I don't know why the mini boss isn't selected. Then once you get here, like these frogs are going to be jumping everywhere. This guy's going to be jumping out of the pack. And it's overall, generally this area tends to be like mayhem. But in mayhem situation, sub is the best because they have super long range. So I favor sub heavily in this area. So I'd say Fort, sub is better. Tyran is about equal. Okay, that's all the Dragonflight dungeons. Go to the old dungeons. Halls. Personally, I prefer sub here. There tends to be a lot of big pulls. Like this pull is really big. This pull is pretty big. This pull is big. A lot of big pulls where sub is way better than Outlaw. Just in general. There's almost no 2-target pulls. You can do like these 2 mini bosses together, which is 2-target. But yeah, on Fort, I think Outlaw or sub is just way better than Outlaw in this area. Once you get here, though, people tend to fight these kings 2 at a time. So Outlaw's better here. But in general, on Fort, I give sub the edge. Tyran, most of the bosses are just pure single target, honestly. Like this is pure single. This is pure single. This is pure single. This part, he's gonna spawn some ads, but like they don't really matter. So Outlaw's probably a little bit better against those ads. Against this boss, though, we have to talk about Vanish. So there's a trick with his Ravenous Sleep where if you're a rogue and you have Vanish, you can just run out super far, be the one that's targeted, and vanish, and no one gets to bleed. So Outlaw is going to have Vanish more often, but Sub can play 2 charges of Vanish, so they're going to have it more consistently. What that means is, like, as Outlaw, you can get all of them, but only if you get lucky. So it tends to be more like every other one. Whereas Sub, you can just say, okay, I'm getting the first 2, I'm not getting any more. So in my opinion, it's actually more consistent as for a Sub Rogue on this boss than Outlaw. Ideally, you just play both and you can just like rotate. But a Sub Rogue can be way more consistent on this boss, whereas Outlaw can like usually get more. But in a Pug scenario especially, I favor Sub because you just say, oh, I'm getting the first 2, after that, you're on your own. So it's really easy for everyone to understand, whereas Outlaw, you have to be like, oh, I'm getting the first one and then maybe the second, depending on my RNG, right? No one in a Pug wants to deal with that. So personally, I favor Sub on this boss, on Tyran especially. These pulls, by the way, the tank is kiting like crazy, so Sub is way better in these pulls. Okay, anyway. Skovald and Odin. Skovald, I think Outlaw is a little bit better because you can kill the ads like way easier without losing boss damage. And on Odin, I think they're about even. Sub has better burst damage, so you're able to take advantage of the window better, but Outlaw has grappling hook, which is really useful on Odin. So I give him about equal. Okay, that's this then in Court of Stars. I think I have these about equal on Fort and Tyran, both. Yeah, I have Outlaw slightly higher on Tyran, Sub better on Fort. So what's the main difference here? Sub is going to be way better at padding, like killing these little mana worms that don't matter. Sub is way better. It kind of matters a little bit that they die like all at the same time, which is way easier to accomplish if you do more damage. So Sub is a little bit better, I think, on that. The main reason I favor sub on fort is because of these imps. Obviously, people tend to say, "Oh, these are small imps. They're just pad." But actually, in reality, like these imps need to die in like 10 seconds. Like if they live more than 10 seconds, you're gonna run out of AOE stops, and they're gonna start like killing people. So burst AOE is pretty important on these imps. So I favor sub on fort. These imps, mostly because of these imps. Like there's a lot of 2 or 3 target, which is where Outlaw kind of shines. But like killing these imps quickly is actually really important, and sub does a way better job than Outlaw at that. On Tyrant for the bosses, Outlaw and sub are pretty much the same on Gerdo. They both can manage the slow, they both can cloak, basically just single target. This boss, in terms of pure boss damage, I think they're about equal. Sub could kill the imps a little bit faster than Outlaw, but it doesn't really matter. Then on last boss, single target, so Outlaw actually has longer range than sub. Unless you're playing Acrobatic Strikes as sub, in which case it's equal. But then you're going to lose damage if you play Acrobatic as sub. So on the last boss, I think Outlaw actually is better target. Outlaw also gets Soothing Darkness baseline, which is really useful on this boss. I don't know why I clicked this. It's this one. But yeah, Outlaw is better on this boss. So I favor Outlaw a little bit on Tyran, but sub on Fort. But they're both pretty equal in this dungeon, in my opinion. Alright, Shadow Moon. So, little disclaimer. Shadow Moon is a complete meme right now. You can chest this dungeon no matter what you play. It doesn't matter. But small distinctions are what this guide is about. So I kind of favor Outlaw in this dungeon. Most of the pulls are kind of small. Sub is obviously going to do better on like these giant little spider pulls, but like who cares about the spiders? If you kill them in 3 seconds or 4 seconds, it doesn't matter. The main reason I favor Outlaw on Fort is this pull over here, these 2 void spawns. Killing these quickly is like these void spawns are the only thing that's going to wipe you on Fort. So killing them quickly is important. Outlaw, it's a 2-target encounter, so Outlaw's better. Throughout the entire dungeon, I think your overall might actually be higher as sub, even on non-skitterlings, just because like you have this 4-target pull, you have this 5-target pull, bunch of stuff here. But in terms of important damage, Outlaw is going to be better, because on these void spawns, Outlaw's better. Tyran, for the bosses, every boss in here pretty much has 2-target cleave. This boss has 2-target cleave when he spawns the ad. This boss has 2-target cleave when he spawns the ad. This boss has 3-target, or 2, depending on how close the ads are. And then this boss has 2-target cleave when he spawns the wall. So all of these bosses have 2-target cleave, which gives Outlaw the edge on Tyran for this dungeon. Alright, last dungeon that we need to cover is Temple. So in Temple, there's a bunch of smallies, these droplets. So people tend to call these pad, but in my opinion, killing these droplets quickly is actually very important on Fort. Because your group is taking a lot of damage from this splash until they die. With these lesser Shaws, it's less important that these die quickly, but you need to kill them like pretty much either all at the same time or like you can't pull more until these are dead. So like damage to them is actually pretty important. So I kind of favor sub there. And then there's also this pull at the end with 1 Infester and 4 guys, which is incredibly difficult for no reason. I don't know why Blizzard added this. But on this pull, sub is going to be way, way better than Outlaw. Like on the service, it looks like there's only 5 mobs, right? Let me just select all of them. There's only 5 mobs, but what people don't realize is that this mob is going to be spawning ads, summon Shaw. And then also he's going to be doing a frontal. There's going to be a bunch of swears on the ground. So it's like a 10-target pull where the tank is kiting. Because like a lot of time they can't even tank these, but even if they could, they still have to move for the swirlies on the ground and for the Flames of Doubt. So this pull is like Sub's wheelhouse. Sub is the king on this pull. It's like a 10-target spread pull, which is Sub's best pull. Whereas Outlaw is okay, but like, you know, like I said before, mobs probably aren't going to be tightly packed. And they can't choose not to hit the lesser Shaw. Blade Flare just hits random 8 targets. So this pull being like one of the most difficult in the dungeon, in my opinion, gives Sub the edge on Fort. On Tyran, it's pretty much the same deal. Like all these bosses, none of these are 2-target. Like this isn't actually 2-target. In fact, sub is a little bit better here because of the rupture spread. This boss is single target. This boss is single target. This boss is single target with burst AoE, which is actually better for sub because you have tornado every 1 minute. So overall, I actually favor sub quite a bit more in this dungeon, especially on fort. On Tyrant, it matters a little bit less because like this pull isn't just gonna gatekeep you through the whole dungeon. Yeah, sub is I think a lot better in temple. All right, so that does it for the video. This was actually way longer than I thought it was going to be. It's a pretty hard question to answer. But overall, I favor sub, and Outlaw is like not far behind, and in fact is a lot better in some scenarios, especially on Tyrannical. Yeah, that's it for the video. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Don't forget to go to my stream to ask me questions. There'll be a link below to both the stream and the spreadsheet which I made. And yeah, hope everyone joins Dragonflight. Catch you later.